The call came just after sunset, when the sky was the color of bruised violets and the world felt painfully quiet. I was standing in the kitchen staring at my phone, the screen lifeless, exactly like it had been for the past 2 years. 2 years since my daughter vanished. 2 years since my life cracked open and refused to seal again. So when the landline rang, a sound I had almost forgotten, something in my chest tightened as if the universe itself had decided to pull a cruel joke on me. But the voice that spoke was not cruel. It was steady, formal, and terrifying. It was the police. They told me I needed to come to the station. They didn't say why. They didn't tell me what happened. They only said I needed to sit down before they could continue. And instantly I knew this was not a call you ignored, not a call you questioned, not a call you negotiated with. This was a call that changed lives, a call that broke them, a call that resurrected them. I drove with my heart pounding like it wanted to rip from my chest. The world outside my windshield blurred, streetlights stretching like golden smears across the night. Every horrible possibility flashed through my mind despite my efforts to push them away. After 2 years of silence, you don't expect good news. You don't expect anything at all. You just try to survive the emptiness. And still, some stubborn fragment of hope inside me flickered. Hope is annoying like that. It refuses to die even when you beg it to because sometimes clinging to hope is more painful than letting it go. When I arrived at the station, 2 officers were waiting for me. Their faces were unreadable, trained into neutral masks that somehow made everything worse. One of them gestured toward a small windowless room. I sat. They remained standing. And then one of them said those impossible words, "You need to sit down," as if I hadn't already. As if sitting could brace a parent for what was coming. Then they opened the door. Not the door to the hallway. A different door. A door I had not noticed until it moved. And behind it stood a girl whose silhouette nearly stole the air from my lungs. For a moment, my brain refused to accept it. I blinked. A hallucination wouldn't blink back. A dream wouldn't flinch at the brightness of the fluorescent lights. But she did. My daughter, or someone who looked like her, but thinner, paler, older in a way no child should ever be. She hesitated before stepping inside, as if crossing that threshold took all the strength she had left. And when her eyes lifted to meet mine, my entire world collapsed and rebuilt itself in the space of a single heartbeat. It was her. It was really her. But something in her gaze was different, shadowed, haunted. And the joy of seeing her collided viciously with the horror of realizing she had lived through something I had not been there to save her from. My instinct was to run to her, to pull her into my arms. But she took a small step backward, as if touch still hurt, as if touch felt dangerous. I froze, holding myself still, because this moment belonged to her and not to my desperation. The officer looked at me with a gravity that made my blood run cold. He said they had found her earlier that day, wandering near the edge of an industrial district miles from our town, disoriented, confused, not quite able to explain how she'd gotten there. They had run her fingerprints twice just to be certain. It made sense. After 2 years, you start doubting your own memories. You start doubting everything. But the strangest part was this. She refused to speak about the time she'd been gone. Not a single word. And even stranger, when they found her, she was carrying something. Something she didn't want to let go of. A small wooden box with no hinges or latch, sealed so tightly they hadn't been able to open it. She kept it tucked against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. When I looked at it, I felt something. Not fear, exactly. Something older, heavier. As if the box had a presence of its own. A weight that didn't match its size. I tried to speak to her, but my voice cracked. Her name slipped out of me with more fragility than I intended. She blinked again, slowly, as if trying to remember who she had been before all of this. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said she wanted to go home. And in that instant, I knew the officers expected explanations, paperwork, statements. But none of that mattered. My daughter wanted to go home, and I was not going to waste another second without her in my reach. But I also knew something else, something hard to admit. I knew that whatever had happened to her was not over just because she had walked back into the world. There was something in the way she held that box, Something in the way her eyes flickered to the corners of the room as if checking for things only she could see. On the drive home, she didn't speak. She stared out the window with that unsettling little box cradled in her lap. Every so often her fingers tightened around it as though she thought someone might try to take it. The silence between us felt thick with unanswered questions, but I forced myself not to push her. She had come back to me. That was enough for now. Even though every instinct screamed that I needed answers, needed clarity, needed to understand what had stolen 2 years of her life. Halfway home, she whispered a question. Not where we were going, not what would happen next. She asked whether her room was the same, whether I'd kept it, whether I'd touched anything. That question hurt. Not because of her words, but because of the truth behind them. Her room was untouched, frozen exactly as it had been the day she disappeared. A shrine, a wound that never healed. I told her the truth. She nodded. And then her grip on the box tightened so sharply I saw her knuckles whiten. And now I want you to pause with me for a moment, because I need you to imagine something. Imagine searching for someone you love, searching until your soul hurts, and suddenly they're back, standing in front of you, changed in ways you can't yet understand. If you were in my place, what would you do first? What would you ask? What would you fear? Tell me in the comments, because I want to know how you would face that moment. When we pulled into the driveway, she looked at the house with an expression I couldn't decipher. She stepped out slowly, almost hesitantly, as though trying to determine if this place was truly real. When she crossed the threshold, her breath caught in her throat. She looked around the hallway, at the pictures on the walls, at the worn carpet, at the small details that had formed the world of her childhood. Her eyes softened for a moment, but the softness vanished as quickly as it came. Something inside her was still coiled tight. I guided her to her room, walking a careful distance behind her. She pushed the door open and stared inside. The bed neatly made, the posters on the wall, the bookshelf still leaning slightly to the left because she refused to let me replace it. Nothing had changed. She stepped in like someone approaching a memory that might shatter if touched. She placed the small box on her desk. I watched her gaze shift between the box and the room, as though weighing which one she belonged to now. I wanted to tell her I had never stopped looking for her, that I had never given up despite everyone insisting it was time to move on. But before I could speak, she turned to me with eyes that held both fear and determination. She asked if she could sleep. She looked exhausted, but not the normal kind of exhausted. This was something deeper, a soul-level exhaustion. I told her yes. She lay down without changing clothes, curling into herself like she was trying to disappear into the blankets. And just before her eyes closed, she whispered a sentence so quiet I almost doubted I heard it. She said the box must not be opened. Not by me, not by anyone. I wanted answers, but I knew pushing her now would only make her retreat further. So I backed away, leaving her door slightly open like I used to when she was small and afraid of the dark. The house felt different with her inside it again, as if it didn't quite know how to hold her presence anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had brought her back wasn't finished, that the box she guarded contained something I wasn't yet ready to face. But whether I was ready or not didn't matter. I could feel the edges of a new nightmare forming. Before the night ended, I knew something else with absolute certainty. This was just the beginning. The night after her return felt like a fragile thread stretched too tight, trembling under the weight of everything unspoken. I sat on the living room couch, listening to the old house breathe around me, every familiar sound suddenly sharpened by worry. The refrigerator humming, the pipes settling, the branches outside brushing against the windows. All of it blended into a single restless rhythm that made it impossible to sleep. I kept replaying the moment she whispered that warning about the box. My daughter, who used to sleep hugging stuffed animals and laughing in her dreams, now clutched a sealed wooden object like it held the last pieces of her sanity. Hours passed. I checked her room 3 times without entering. She hadn't moved once. Curled up on her side, the box pressed to her chest, her breathing shallow and uneven. It felt wrong. Children don't sleep like statues. They shift, mumble, tangle themselves in their sheets. But she lay there as if afraid that any movement would alert something lurking beyond the edges of our world, something she didn't dare disturb. That was when a realization settled over me, heavy and icy. Whatever had taken her away had not let her go willingly. Something had followed her back. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally forced my eyes shut. But sleep never came gently. I jolted awake to a soft sound, like a whisper brushing against my ear. I sat up, heart thundering, and realized the house had gone unnaturally still. No hum, no creaks, no wind. A silence that felt intentional. I stood and walked slowly down the hallway toward her room, each step loud in that unnatural quiet. The door was cracked open the way I had left it, but the space beyond looked darker than it should. I reached out and pushed it a little wider. She wasn't in the bed. The blanket lay undisturbed, shaped exactly as it had been around her small frame, like she had evaporated without disturbing the world around her. Panic struck instantly, hot and suffocating. I whispered her name, afraid of breaking the silence but more afraid of not finding her. I checked the closet, the bathroom, every corner of the house. Nothing. I was seconds from calling the police again when I noticed something out of place on the staircase. Footprints. Bare, small, and faint. And next to them, something that stopped me cold. A smear of dirt. Black, gritty, almost like soot. Not from our yard. Not from any place around this house. I followed the footprints to the backyard door, which was unlocked. She had gone outside. Into the darkness. Into the cold. Without shoes. Without telling me. Without the box. That last part terrified me most. Stepping into the yard, the night wrapped around me with an unsettling stillness. The air felt heavier than before, thick with a tension I couldn't name. The moonlight was dim, struggling behind a veil of clouds, but I could see her. She stood at the far edge of the lawn, facing the tree line, motionless as a shadow carved into the night. My breath hitched. I called her name again, more forceful this time. She didn't turn, didn't flinch. She stood perfectly still, as if listening to something I could not hear. As I approached her, the grass beneath my feet felt colder, damp. Wrong! When I finally reached her side, she was whispering, very quietly, repeating the same few words over and over. They're still there. They're still there. They're still there. Her eyes were wide open, staring into the dark forest. But when I looked, I saw nothing. Only trees. Only shadows. I touched her shoulder gently. She gasped, jolting back into herself, her body trembling under my hand. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she grabbed my hand with a strength that startled me and pulled me back toward the house. Once inside, she locked the door, then checked it twice, as if trying to keep something out. Something specific. I wanted to ask her what she had seen, or heard, or felt, but she wasn't ready. Her breathing was rapid and ragged, and she wouldn't look away from the window. Only when the first light of dawn touched the sky did she relax enough to move. And the first thing she did was look for the box, still on the desk, still sealed. But now she approached it with desperation. She placed her hands around it, closing her eyes, as though listening for something inside. Then she exhaled slowly and murmured that it was quieter now, that she had been afraid it would wake while she was gone. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know how to even think. Instead, I asked what she had been doing outside. She hesitated, her lips trembling, then said she wasn't looking for anything. She was making sure something hadn't followed her home, that whatever she escaped from hadn't managed to find us yet. Her fear was real, too real, and I realized with growing dread that whatever she had been running from didn't belong to the ordinary world. And the box, whatever it was, wasn't just an object. It was connected to her survival, maybe even the only thing keeping her safe. Later that morning, she sat at the kitchen table staring at her hands. She hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken, not until she finally lifted her gaze and asked me a question that wound itself deep into my bones. She asked if I would believe her no matter what she told me, no matter how strange, frightening, or impossible it sounded. I told her yes, because she was my daughter, because she had survived something unimaginable, because she needed me to be stronger than my doubt. Her shoulders shook with relief. She took a shaky breath, and then she began telling me fragments of what she remembered. Not everything, not yet, but enough to turn my blood cold. She said she hadn't been alone during those 2 years, and she hadn't been held in any place humans built. She spoke of corridors that shifted shape, of rooms that moved when she wasn't looking, of voices that whispered not in her ears but inside her bones. She said there were others there too, other children, but not all of them made it out. And the ones who didn't changed. When she saw my reaction, she apologized. Apologized for coming back, for bringing danger with her, for not choosing differently even though she had no choices at all. I stopped her before she could blame herself further, but she kept insisting that the place she escaped from was not done with her, that the box was the only thing keeping its attention away, that if it opened, even a crack, even for a second, something inside would find her again. I wanted to dismiss it. I wanted to tell her it was trauma, confusion, nightmares that had stuck to her. But the truth was, her voice didn't shake when she said it. Her eyes didn't wander. She believed every word. And then something happened that made me believe her too. A soft tapping sound came from upstairs. Slow, precise, as if knuckles were knocking gently against wood. She froze. Her breathing stopped. Her eyes widened with a terror so raw I felt it punch straight through me. She whispered that the knocking wasn't from someone. It was from something. And it wasn't knocking on her door. It was knocking on the box. Adrenaline shot through me. I stood, ready to go upstairs, but she grabbed my arm with both hands and shook her head violently. She said that opening the box would be the worst thing we could do, that whatever was inside wasn't meant to exist here, that it was searching for her. The knocking continued. 3 slow taps, then silence, then 3 taps again, a rhythm that felt almost intentional, almost patient. I wanted to run, to flee the house with her, to burn the box or bury it or throw it into the deepest ocean. But she insisted that none of that would work, that it wasn't a physical thing, that it wasn't tied to space or distance the way normal things are. She looked at me with pleading eyes and asked me the hardest question she had ever asked in her life. She asked if I could trust her enough to not touch the box, not investigate, not try to protect her in the usual ways. Just listen, just follow her lead, just believe her. And I did. I chose to believe her, because whatever nightmare she had escaped, she was the only one who understood its rules. For the rest of the day, she didn't leave my side. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow made her breath catch. Yet she never cried. Not once. Because whatever she endured had burned the tears right out of her. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, she told me something else. Something far worse. She said the box was weakening, that the thing inside had begun to notice the world outside, and that soon it would try harder to reach her. When I asked her how she knew, she whispered the words that would keep me awake for countless nights to come, because it had already spoken to her once, and it had promised it would find her again. If you're still here, if you want to stay with me through the next part of this journey, make sure you're subscribed. Before anything else, come closer with me for just one breath, because if you've been following this story, if you've stood here with me through the mystery, the fear, the return, then I need you here for what comes next. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because this part is where everything shifts, where truth stops hiding in the shadows and steps directly into the light. What comes next is heavier, deeper, and more frightening than anything that came before, but it's also the beginning of the path to hope, the path to healing, the path to a kind of ending we never believed we'd deserve. Take a breath, then walk with me. The night after the knocking began, the house felt like a living thing. Every wall seemed to tighten inward. Every door felt too thin. Every window too exposed. My daughter barely spoke, and when she did, her voice trembled with a kind of exhaustion that didn't come from lack of sleep but from carrying something too heavy for someone her age to hold. She moved through the house as if expecting something to leap from behind every corner. She kept her hands close to her chest, like she was bracing herself against an invisible pressure. And the box, the small, sealed, silent box, remained on her desk upstairs, untouched but impossible to ignore. Every time my eyes drifted in its direction, a cold ripple slid down my spine. It wasn't just an object anymore. It was an intrusion, a boundary between worlds, a threat that neither of us fully understood. As evening bled into night, the air thickened again. I could feel it, that same unnatural silence from before, the kind that makes every breath feel like a crime against the darkness pressing in from all sides. I tried distracting her with small things, old memories, gentle questions, but her mind was somewhere else, trapped somewhere far beyond our kitchen table and soft yellow lights. And then, without warning, she whispered my name. Not loudly, not fearfully, but with quiet urgency. I turned, and her eyes weren't focused on me. They were staring past me, up the staircase, toward her room, toward the box. She didn't move at first. Her body tensed, her fingers trembling against the side of her chair. And then she said it was happening again. Not knocking this time. Something else. Something worse. She said she could feel it, like a pulse. Like the box had a heartbeat that wasn't human. A heartbeat that was growing stronger. Her voice cracked as she told me that the box was no longer content to stay quiet. Something inside was stirring, waking, listening, and this time it wasn't just calling for her. It was aware of me too. Instinct took over. I reached for her hand and told her we were leaving the house right then, taking the car, driving anywhere far from this shadow that clung to her. But she shook her head with such fierce resistance that my words caught in my throat. She said we couldn't run, because the box wasn't tied to the house. It wasn't tied to a place at all. It was tied to her. And wherever she went, it would follow. And if she tried to leave it, it wouldn't just come looking. It would come angry. My pulse hammered in my skull, but I forced myself to stay calm for her sake. I asked her what the thing inside wanted, what it expected. She hesitated, as though speaking the truth might make it real again. And then she told me something that froze my blood. She said the creature, the presence trapped inside that impossible wooden shell, wasn't just after her. It wanted a way back into the world it had been sealed away from. It wanted a doorway, a vessel, a mind, a body, and for reasons she didn't understand, it had chosen her. But then she said something else, something small but powerful, that cracked the fear gripping my chest. She said she didn't think it had chosen her because she was weak. She thought it had chosen her because she had fought it harder than anyone else ever had, because she had resisted when the others didn't, because some part of her spirit refused to break even in the darkest corners of that shifting, impossible place. She said that's why she had survived when others didn't. Not luck, not mercy, strength. A fierce, unyielding strength she didn't even realize she possessed. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke, and I could see fire returning to her eyes. Something inside her was awakening too, not the darkness, but the part of her that had endured it. And when she stood taller than I'd seen her since she came home. She said she wanted to go upstairs, to face it, not to open the box. Never that, but to confront its presence, to let it know she was not running anymore. Every instinct told me to protect her, to keep her away from whatever lay beyond that wooden shell. But I also understood that if I denied her this moment, if I forced her to stay small, stay afraid, then I would be helping the creature win, and I wasn't going to let that happen. I walked with her up the stairs, slowly, each step heavier than the last. When we reached her doorway, she paused, inhaled deeply, and pushed the door open. The box sat on the desk, illuminated by the faint glow of her nightlight, but something about it had changed. The air around it shimmered subtly, bending light in a way that made my stomach churn. The hairs on my arms rose. My daughter stepped inside first, and I followed, feeling an invisible pressure settle over my shoulders, like entering a room filled with static electricity. She approached the desk and stopped only inches from the box, her hands curled into fists at her sides, and for the first time, she spoke to it. Not softly, not fearfully. She told it she wasn't its doorway. She wasn't its vessel. She wasn't its chosen anything. The air shifted. A faint vibration hummed through the floor, and then a low sound rose from the box. Not knocking, not scratching, but a slow, resonant growl, like something ancient curling itself awake inside a prison too small to contain it. My daughter flinched, but she didn't step back. She stood her ground even as the growl grew louder, shaking the desk, rattling the glass on the window. I stepped closer to her, ready to grab her if anything happened. And then, suddenly, the sound stopped. The vibration ceased. The room went still. My daughter whispered that it understood. It realized she was no longer afraid. And then a strange warmth filled the room, seeping into my skin, almost like sunlight. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, and for the first time in days, her entire body relaxed. She said the box was weakening not because the creature inside was breaking out, but because her fear, the thing it fed on, was fading. She said the creature's power depended on terror, on isolation, on silence, and by speaking to it, by rejecting it, she had cut off its source. She had starved it. Then, slowly, she reached toward me and took my hand. Her voice was soft but steady when she said she was ready to break its hold forever, ready to close whatever doorway it had tried to open. She said she couldn't do it alone, but together, we could. And in that moment, something inside me shifted too. The fear that had burrowed into my heart loosened its grip. I realized that whatever darkness had touched her had not destroyed her. It had forged her. We spent the rest of the night beside the box, not touching it, but refusing to leave it. My daughter leaned against me, her breathing calm and even. She said the creature's presence was fading like a dying echo, and when the first golden line of sunrise broke through her window, she whispered that it was gone, not sealed, not trapped, gone, banished by the one thing it could never devour, her courage. And with the light filling the room, something extraordinary happened. The box cracked down the center, not violently, but gently, like a seed opening. Inside, instead of darkness, instead of horror, instead of anything monstrous, there was only dust. Fine, gray, harmless dust that drifted into the sunlight and disappeared like ash in the wind. My daughter exhaled a long, shuddering breath, the breath of someone finally free. Let me know when you're ready, and I'll take you into the organic conclusion, where everything settles into hope and healing, and this story ends exactly the way it should, with peace, with clarity, and with a happy ending. The morning the box finally released its last breath of dust, the world felt startlingly ordinary in the sweetest possible way. Sunlight streamed through the window with a warmth I had forgotten could exist, settling on my daughter's face as if welcoming her back not just to our home, but to the simplest rhythms of living. She stood there for a long time, watching the particles drift and vanish, her eyes softer than I had seen them in years. Not empty, not haunted, just tired in a human way, the kind of tired that belongs to someone who has finally reached safety after running far too long. I stepped closer, ready to steady her if she wavered, but she didn't. Her shoulders lifted with a slow inhale, and when she exhaled, there was no tremor, no shadow, no fear hiding beneath the breath, only release, only relief. And in that moment, I realized that what we had faced together had not just closed a door on whatever darkness hunted her, it had opened another, one that led us toward healing, toward rebuilding, toward life. She reached for my hand without hesitation, intertwining her fingers with mine the way she used to when she was small, and she leaned her head against my shoulder with a fragile trust that made my heart ache. For the first time since her return, she allowed herself to rest in the presence of someone who loved her, no longer guarding herself against unseen threats or impossible nightmares. We went downstairs together, moving slowly, as if relearning the steps of an old familiar dance. The house felt lighter, its corners no longer crowded with invisible tension. Even the silence felt different. Not oppressive this time, but peaceful, like a long exhale finally let go. I made breakfast, something simple that filled the kitchen with warm, comforting smells. She sat at the table watching me, her fingers tracing idle patterns against the wood, and when I placed a plate in front of her, she smiled. A small smile, yes, but real. The kind that reaches the eyes. The kind I had been terrified I would never see again. She ate slowly, thoughtfully, as though tasting every detail of normalcy for the first time. When she finished, she looked at me with an expression that threaded gratitude with something deeper, a quiet, steady strength beginning to take root. She said she knew healing would take time. She knew the memories would still come, some nights darker than others. But she also knew she wasn't facing any of it alone anymore. And she wasn't afraid of the shadows because she had already walked through the worst of them and survived. She said she wanted to reclaim her life, piece by piece, moment by moment, and I promised I would walk every step with her. Later that day, we went outside together, stepping into the open air with a freedom we both felt but didn't need to speak aloud. The trees swayed gently, the wind soft against her hair, and there was nothing lurking at the edges of the woods anymore. No whispering presence, no unseen eyes, only the quiet of a world that finally made sense again. She looked toward the tree line with a calm that would have been impossible days earlier, and then she turned to me and asked if we could go somewhere, anywhere, just to feel the world again. So, we drove. No destination, no plan, just the two of us following the road as it curved through sunlight and open sky. At one point, she opened the window, letting the breeze rush in, and she closed her eyes, letting the warmth touch her face. And in that moment, she looked peaceful, radiantly alive. She told me she could feel herself coming back, the parts of her that had been trapped or silent rising slowly to the surface. She told me that while the darkness had changed her, it had not damaged her beyond repair. It had taught her something she hadn't known before, that she was capable of fighting even when she felt broken, that she was stronger than the shadows that tried to claim her. She said she wasn't a survivor because someone rescued her. She was a survivor because she refused to surrender her spirit. When we finally returned home that evening, the house felt warmer somehow, as if it recognized the shift within its walls. We sat together on the living room floor, talking softly about the future, school, friends, routines, dreams she thought she had lost. She asked if things would ever feel normal again, and I told her they wouldn't feel like the old normal, but they would feel like a new one, a better one, a life shaped not by fear but by resilience, by love, by the quiet strength she carried. She leaned into me, head resting against my arm, and said she believed that, truly believed it. And for the first time since the day she disappeared, hope felt real, solid, something I could hold without it slipping through my fingers. We stayed there until the sun dipped into twilight and the first stars blinked awake in the sky. No tension followed us, no whispers, no fear, only peace settling into the quiet spaces of our lives like soft dust. When we finally returned home that evening, the house felt warmer somehow, as if it recognized the shift within its walls. We sat together on the living room floor, talking softly about the future, school, friends, routines, dreams she thought she had lost. She asked if things would ever feel normal again, and I told her they wouldn't feel like the old normal, but they would feel like a new one, a better one, a life shaped not by fear, but by resilience, by love, by the quiet strength she carried. She leaned into me, head resting against my arm, and said she believed that, truly believed it. And for the first time since the day she disappeared, hope felt real, solid, something I could hold without it slipping through my fingers. We stayed there until the sun dipped into twilight and the first stars blinked awake in the sky. No tension followed us, no whispers, no fear, only peace settling into the quiet spaces of our lives like soft dust. And now, at the close of this story, I want to leave you with the same feeling that fills this house tonight. Not dread, not darkness, but hope. Because no matter how deep the shadows stretch, no matter how lost someone may seem, there is always a way back into the light. My daughter found hers. We found ours together. And that's why this ending belongs not to fear, but to healing, to courage, to love returning home. If you felt this journey with us, if it held you from beginning to end, then let this moment be the one where you breathe out, let the tension go, and carry a bit of this hope with you. And if you want more stories like this one, stories that take you to the edge and pull you back into the warmth of a happy ending, then don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. There are many more journeys ahead, and I'd be honored to have you walk with me through every single one of them.